They refused to pay the bill and mocked the waitress. They thought no one would stop them until a quiet old man stood up. The rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows of Riverview Restaurant, one of the city's finest dining establishments. Inside, the warm amber glow of crystal chandeliers reflected off polished silverware and pristine white tablecloths. It was the kind of place where every detail whispered elegance, where the wealthy came to see and be seen. But on this particular Tuesday evening, beneath all that shine and grandeur, something far less beautiful was about to unfold. At table 7, near the center of the dining room, sat 3 men in tailored suits. Their watches gleamed under the light, their laughter loud and careless. They had ordered generously, expensive wine, steaks, desserts, the kind of meal that cost more than some people earned in a week. And serving them with quiet efficiency and a polite smile was Emma. She was in her early 30s, her uniform pressed neatly despite its age, her hair tied back in a simple bun. Her hands moved with practiced grace, refilling glasses, clearing plates, never asking for anything in return but the dignity of doing her job well. She had been working double shifts for months now, trying to keep up with rent, trying to give her young daughter a life that didn't feel like constant struggle. Every tip mattered. Every smile she offered, even when her feet ached and her heart felt heavy, was an investment in tomorrow. But tonight, tomorrow felt very far away. When Emma placed the bill on the table, folded discreetly in a leather holder, the 3 men barely glanced at it. One of them, a man with slick-back hair and a cold smirk, pushed it aside like it was nothing. "We're not paying for this," he said flatly. Emma blinked, thinking perhaps she had misheard. "I'm sorry, sir," she asked gently, her voice steady but uncertain. The man leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I said we're not paying." The food was mediocre. The service was slow. "You expect us to pay full price for this?" His friends chuckled, nodding in agreement as if this were all some kind of game. Emma's throat tightened. She knew the food had been perfect. She knew she had done everything right. But she also knew what this was. This wasn't about the meal. This was about power, about men who could afford anything, deciding that tonight they wanted to afford nothing and make someone else pay the price. "Sir, I assure you everything was prepared to standard," Emma said quietly, trying to keep her composure. "If there was an issue, I can speak to the chef, but the bill is a joke," the man interrupted, his voice rising now, drawing attention from nearby tables. "And so are you, frankly. What are you, a single mom working tables to get by? Maybe if you worked harder, you wouldn't be stuck in a place like this, begging for tips." The words hit like stones. Emma felt her face flush, her hands trembling slightly as she held the bill. Around them, other diners had gone quiet, watching. Some looked uncomfortable, others looked away. No one said anything. From across the room, the restaurant manager, a thin man in a pressed vest, glanced over nervously. He saw the situation unfolding, saw Emma standing there alone, but he did nothing. He turned his back and walked toward the kitchen. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want a scene. And so Emma stood there, exposed and humiliated, with no one to stand beside her. But someone was watching. In the far corner of the restaurant, at a small table tucked away from the noise and the light, sat an older man. He was in his mid-60s, dressed simply in a gray sweater and dark slacks. His face was lined with age, his hair silver, his presence so quiet that most people never even noticed he was there. He had been coming to this restaurant for years, always sitting in the same corner, always ordering the same modest meal. The staff knew him as a kind man, soft-spoken, generous with his tips, but no one knew much else. He never drew attention. He never asked for anything special. He simply watched and listened and remembered. And tonight he had seen everything. The man at table 7 was still talking, his voice dripping with cruelty. "You know what? We're leaving, and there's nothing you can do about it. Go cry to your manager, see if he cares." He stood, his friends rising with him, all 3 of them grinning like wolves. Emma's eyes were wet now, but she refused to let the tears fall. Not here, not in front of them. She opened her mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. And then a voice, calm and quiet, cut through the noise. "Excuse me, gentlemen." Everyone turned. The older man had risen from his corner table and was walking slowly toward them. His steps were measured, unhurried. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something steady and unshakable, that made the room go still. The man in the suit scoffed. "And who are you, Grandpa? You want to pay for us?" The older man stopped a few feet away, his hands folded calmly in front of him. "No," he said softly, "but I do want to remind you where you are." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "You're standing in my restaurant." The words hung in the air like thunder. The suited man blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "Your restaurant," the older man nodded. "Yes, I own this building. I own this business. I've owned it for 30 years. The color drained from the man's face. His friends shifted uncomfortably, suddenly looking much smaller. Around the room, whispers began to spread. The staff, frozen near the kitchen, stared in shock. Even Emma, still holding the bill, looked at the older man with wide, disbelieving eyes. She had served him 100 times. She had never known. The owner took a slow breath, his gaze never leaving the three men. "I've spent decades building this place on one principle: respect. Respect for the food, respect for the craft, and respect for the people who make it possible. People like Emma who work harder in a single shift than you've worked in your entire lives." His voice was still calm, but there was steel beneath it now. "You came into my restaurant, ate my food, insulted my staff, and tried to walk out without paying. You thought you could do that because you have money, because you wear expensive suits, because you believe you're better than her." He stepped closer. "You're not." The suited man opened his mouth, stammered something, but the owner raised a hand. "I want you to leave now, and your band, all three of you, don't come back." For a moment the men stood frozen, humiliation burning across their faces. Then, without another word, they turned and walked quickly toward the door, their heads down, their arrogance shattered. The door swung shut behind them, and the restaurant remained silent. The owner turned to Emma, and his expression softened. "Are you all right?" Emma nodded, but tears were streaming down her face now, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of something she couldn't quite name. I didn't know," she whispered. The owner smiled gently. "You weren't supposed to. I like to see how things really are when no one's watching." He glanced at the bill still in her hand. "They owe you for that meal. I'll cover it, and I'm giving you a raise, effective immediately. You've earned it 1,000 times over." Emma's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. The owner placed a hand on her shoulder just for a moment. "You work hard. You treat people with kindness. That's worth more than anything they'll ever have." Then he turned to the manager, who had reappeared, pale and stammering apologies. The owner's gaze was firm. "We'll talk tomorrow." And with that, he returned to his corner table, sat down quietly, and finished his tea. The restaurant slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed, plates clinked, but something had shifted. Emma stood there, still trembling, still processing what had just happened. For so long, she had felt invisible, powerless, like her kindness meant nothing in a world that only rewarded cruelty. But tonight, someone had seen her. Someone had stood up, not because he had to, but because he believed she mattered. And in that moment, everything felt a little less heavy, a little more possible. Later that night, after her shift ended, Emma walked out into the cool evening air. The rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the streetlights. She thought about her daughter waiting at home, about the bills on the table, about all the weight she carried every single day. But she also thought about the older man in the corner, about the way he had spoken, about the way he had seen her. And she realized something. Kindness isn't loud. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, watching, waiting, until the moment it's needed most. And when it steps forward, it changes everything. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that dignity and respect matter more than wealth or power, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about a time someone stood up for you, or a time you stood up for someone else. And subscribe, because stories like this, stories about real people and real courage, are what we all need a little more of.